It's my dark philosophy that there's more to life than we like to admit, and in the dead of night when we lie awake and ponder our lives, we often wonder who is right. Where did we come from? Where do we go? There's so much to the universe that we don't know, so we just explore all the dark corners, seeking out more than what the surface lays on us. The dark philosophy so filled with light, it makes you believe that everything will be alright. So join me now on this darkened road, and we can bear witness as history unfolds. Indeed. Welcome to Dark Philosophy. As you can see, my normal host hasn't made it yet, or my normal co-host hasn't made it yet, so if he comes along, we'll let him in. But joining us tonight for a good discussion is Sean from Omegastar Productions. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey there, Corey. I'm doing all right. I wasn't too sure if I was going to go with Omegastar Productions or Escaping the Matrix. I went with Omegastar because that's how this community knows me. Just want the chat to know. Apologies, I won't be interacting much via
his
text.
setup's kind of crappy.
I'll do my best to answer anything that pops up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to delving into some philosophical topics with you tonight, bro. And hopefully Jeremy will join us. If not, then...
Well, if he doesn't, the show will go on, and if he does, awesome.
Yeah.
But we will take a moment to recognize our early bird chat guests here. We've got Jacob Ironside. Excuse me. Hail, Jacob. We've got Small Time Republic. Hail. You're awesome. Thank you for coming. Writing with Charlie. Welcome, bro. Good to see ya. And then Sean E. Step. Hail,
Hey,
hail.
guys.
Hey, and then there's Lasso of Truth.
Hey, Lasso.
And of course, anyone watching this that hasn't seen the 500 subscriber celebration, go check that out. And then check out the Corey cut, because they're both hilarious. Both Lasso and Sean are in the video and the stream. It's amazing how that works. But all right. So, do you want to just jump into picking a topic, or you want to
Yeah,
give
if
a
you
little pad
want to jump right
time?
into it,
All
we
right,
can do that.
we can do that. All right, and the topics for tonight are dreams, assumptions, and hate and indifference.
Okay. I mean, all of these choices are really good ones. Dreams, assumptions. But I think I'm gonna go with hate and indifference. Mostly because I think it's quite prevalent to today's world. So yeah,
All right.
we'll go with that.
Got a Prime Video ad behind you. I'm
I
sorry,
know.
I'm just getting distracted. Whenever there's a screen on a screen,
There we go.
I gotta watch it. There you go. All right. So, hate and indifference.
There are many ways to approach the conversation of hate and indifference. The assertion could be made that indifference is the natural state of the universe, while hate is nothing more than a petty emotional response to things that make people uncomfortable. It could also be said that hate is damaging, but indifference is far more so because it disconnects us from the suffering of humanity. The question is it healthier to hate or not care?
Well, there's the question, and if you didn't catch the message, roundabout way of saying, which do you think is the most damaging? Hate or indifference?
That's a very good question, by the way. First, we have to go to analyze a little bit what hate is. It's an emotional response, and it comes with the territory of being a human being. We are emotional beings.
Indeed.
I think indifference comes from more of a state of trying to find the right word for it. It's almost dehumanized when you come from that state. When it's almost, there's a lack of emotion and a lot of times a lack of thought process. But I think what's more damaging, it depends on the situation. It depends on the context. I think hate, if you are constantly in a state of hating on things, or in a state of just that raw emotion of hate, because it is a very powerful, very overwhelming emotion, especially if you let it get control of you. It can leave you emotionally compromised. It can leave you open to manipulation, um, which goes along with,
Very much so.
yeah. So I do not recommend people dwell in a state of hatred for too long. That being said, I do not um, think people should ignore hatred. I think a lot of people take hatred as this thing that should be, oh, it's almost like a taboo, you know. So that's almost more damaging when you don't acknowledge that emotion, because it can lead
Yeah.
to
Well, it's important.
yeah.
It's important to identify the driving emotion that goes into hate, which is actually anger. Now, a lot of people that aren't familiar with the anger processes, that's typically anger comes out when you feel slighted, when you get hurt, or when you are in a state of ignorance. And I don't mean that in any type of belittling way, but when you don't know something, it can scare you or piss you off. And sometimes when you're scared, you get pissed. And then when you're angry at something consistently, it can build up a hate response, making you automatically associate anger with said thing. And I'm saving this comment from writing with Charlie to talk about in a little bit, because we'll get
You
to
got
that.
a really
But
good point there. With
yes, he does.
this topic, this choice that we've chosen, it's a very deep and complicated one. It's very complex.
Yes.
So
And
it's very easy. It's not easy where to start on this one, and
well,
there's going to be a lot of back and forth, I feel.
well, when you look at the origins of before we move on, hail Katina Martin. Glad you could make it.
Hey
Glad
there.
to see you. And hail Stabby Sherry. Hey, she's getting shanky. Yeah. And I'll get back to you riding with Charlie. But it's important to understand the origins and the salient issues involved with these two phenomena. And as we've said, hate is an emotional response, typically triggered from repeated exposure to anger situations or negative associations that generate anger. So usually hate is an angry thing. Indifference, from my perspective, from what I've seen in the world and stuff, is more of a learned trait. People who are born indifferent to everything, we see them as, say, sociopaths and stuff like that. And most of the time they are, because they're indifferent to everything. They can't even feel emotions. So why would they get angry? Yes, psychopaths do get angry, but for different reasons. Not the topic. But so indifference is typically a learned or particularly a taught experience or manifestation in human beings. And we see that, like, kids tolerating pain, stuff like that, when they're intolerant towards something. I'm getting off indifference. When they're indifferent towards something, they don't put a lot of mental energy into it, right? Their parents, the more focus their parents put on something, the more focus the child will put on something. For instance, if you talk about your guns a lot, you bring them out a lot, you show them to your kids a lot, the likelihood of them wanting to play with or touch those is even higher than usual. Now, I'm not saying that, you shouldn't have your kid around guns as long as you're being safe. It's fine. But if you teach them to be indifferent by being indifferent towards it yourself, they won't have either attachment or hate towards said thing. And I feel that that is a little bit more healthy than teaching people to react in the emotional, angry way of hatred.
I think you bring up some very good points there, especially when it comes to in the childhood phase of human development, because that's one of the things I would like to touch on here in both when it comes to tolerance, intolerance, and emotional states such as hate, is maturity. And I don't mean that
Yes.
in the state of childhood over to adulthood, I mean that in the sense of emotional
Actual maturity.
maturity. Yeah, emotional maturity, mental maturity, or intellect, maturity and intellect, and spiritual maturity, which is usually left out of it.
Yes.
I think when those are out of balance, um, when it comes to dealing with emotions and tolerance levels, they're going to be out of balance too, because it's all tied together. It's like a symbiotic thing. So like hatred, for example, it can bounce off of other emotional states, even
It
love.
can. It can.
Which if you want to
Yes.
cue his,
Yeah, I'll bring up Charlie's chat here. So, right in what Charlie says, love and hate seem to be two sides of the same coin, and this is an idea that gets tossed around a lot. The opposite of love is hate, but I've always been of the mindset that the opposite of love is actually indifference, because love, like hate, are both emotional responses, and it also shows attachment. So they're not necessarily different from each other because you're still attached to something and you're still attaching emotion to it. If you don't love something and you don't hate something, the polar opposite of that is being indifferent to its entire existence. But that's my 2 cents. What are your thoughts, Sean?
I think when it comes to playing into different emotions, like I was going to mention fear. Fear is also a big part of hate as well, and indifference. Actually,
Yes.
it can lead to indifference. It can lead to, a fear of experiencing emotions, or
This
acknowledging
is true.
emotions. This is the complexity of.
Which, by the
Go ahead.
way, if you try not to feel emotions and you try to make yourself too indifferent to everything as a human being, you break yourself. Because guess
Yeah.
what? Humans are both social and emotional creatures. So if you try to cut either one of those off, you're pegging yourself. So
Yeah, and it ain't easy as well. But you could, yeah, because you got to look at, there are many factors involved with emotions and tolerance. Just gonna say hello to Katina Martin real quick. Hey, because we gotta acknowledge kind of the elephant in the room there, and that's the world we currently live in. Um,
yes,
and there's one thing I've kind of noticed is very prevalent is a dehumanization of the society as a whole, at least in 2022. Um, and that's usually, it leads to like narcissistic behaviors, it leads to selfish behaviors, and it's kind of a suppression of consciousness. Now, when you, and bear with me on this one because it is going to tie into both hatred and intolerance. Um,
indifference.
yeah, sorry.
I messed
Indifference,
up
yes,
earlier, so
but yeah, but we're intolerant. We're still acknowledging intolerance, right? Because that's part of the subject matter.
yes. And I will actually talk about. I want to talk about the role of tolerance in
hmm
hatred, but we'll
Absolutely.
get there.
Well,
So
we'll
go
get to
ahead.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because my train of thought.
yeah, you're good.
In the world, like because people's emotion, with the dehumanization, because we are human in theory conscious beings, that experience emotions and whatnot. When we exist in a society that shuns that or is trying to destroy that, that is constantly trying to destroy people's consciousness, you're gonna get a situation where people's emotional states, mental states, spiritual states are way out of whack, way out of balance, and that's usually how
Yes,
a destruction process starts. That's usually a precursor to something that is super destructive, and that's how we get to something that can no longer be classed as a human being. I think like consciousness will be taken out of the equation, people's emotional states will be taken out of the equation, um, and you almost get a very dangerous form of indifference. Now, when it comes to intolerance, I think because I feel like tolerance has been warped. There's like you should tolerate everything, you blah blah blah. Like,
Well,
they go to
see,
extremes. Go ahead.
all
Go ahead.
right, since we're going to talk about that, I'm just going to throw my thoughts out here.
Sure.
And it's the fact that the society of tolerance that they tried to build within the last 20 years, I think was actually so successful at being tolerant that we allowed too much to happen.
Now you're talking.
And when people tolerate things that actually trigger an actual hate response from some emotional, spiritual, or programmed place, they bottle it up because they have to be tolerant, right? And what happens when you bottle things up? Pressure builds. And as it builds, you're getting screwed. And as you get screwed inside, you want to let that out. And then we have a bunch of crazy ass people around us doing stupid ass shit. And then those of us who are in the middle are kind of like, you guys are all stupid. Like, what the hell? You know? But anyway, when it comes to tolerance's play in hate, I think tolerance increased the level of hate that we're actually seeing now because we didn't take time to address things that were actually issues.
That's a very good point because that is actually, it leads perfectly into what I was going to say because, you know, we're in our 30s now, so we've experienced a little bit. You remember in the 2000s, they were talking all about tolerance, you know, and the problem is with the world being so out of balance, you're going to have people being tolerant of things they shouldn't be tolerant of, and you have people being intolerant of things maybe they should be more tolerant of.
Right.
So, and people go to extremes, especially when it comes to people that I almost class as pseudo-spiritual people.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is a big problem. They are tolerant of way too much. They think,
yes,
you know, and forgiving of everything. Well, maybe they shouldn't, and it comes with a lack of immaturity on that specific thing, whether it's, you know, in this case, it's spirituality, but. You know, it's like, let me give you an example. A lot of people are intolerant of people with different skin colors, different sexual orientations, and different beliefs. Whereas they're totally tolerant with things like, you know, external control mechanisms that are maybe helping destroying the world we live in or destroying their
Right.
lives. It's kind of, that's what I mean by out of whack. You know, they're not conscious enough of things they should, you know, of what it means to be tolerant and intolerant, you know. And I admit it, I'm still struggling with this as well because, you know, we live in such a world where it makes it very difficult. You know, you got to take things into account, like, you know, one's mental state, one's emotional state. There are things that challenge those, you know, to the point where some people have gone insane, you know, because their limits have taken they're taken beyond their limits with their emotional and mental capacity.
Yes.
So they may not be as tolerant as maybe they should be, but, and I'm not making excuses, this is where consciousness comes into it. And when you go into a social situation, for example, one needs to be a little more conscious of what they say.
Yeah.
Their own emotional state, and not only that, but what others say, and their emotional state and their mental state. And it's not an easy thing. That's part of developing their maturity. You know, it's, if people were just a little bit more consciousness, and it ties directly into choice as well, because I think tolerance, it's a choice thing. You know, it's what, even under the stress levels we're under, even you know, a lot of people aren't aware of choice. They, you know, I have no choice in the matter. Yes, you do. Even in the most difficult situations, like if you're going to lose your job, you know, if you do this specific thing, or if you're going to remain silent or tolerant of something that maybe you shouldn't be you shouldn't tolerate. You know, it's they will use that excuse, I don't have a choice in the matter. Yes, you do.
Well,
it's just a very difficult one. But go ahead.
well, in recent years, I've also seen the rise of what I call righteous hate, where they use their hate as a standpoint to yell about whatever they want, like to turn the tables just slightly towards a political time on this channel. Let's do it. The LGBT community, the LG and the B are not a huge problem. The T and the Q are actually becoming super saturated with people who have righteous hate that I think a lot of them are fake, by the way. They're not actually members of this community. They just want the attention from it so they can spew their bullshit. But a lot of them are standing on hate as their soapbox, and they're trying to fight hate by being hateful.
Yes,
and
just
it
real
doesn't work.
quickly.
It's not fire.
No.
Can't fight it.
But a lot of them, they deny that it is hate, but it is. We have to call it for what it is. We have to acknowledge things for what they are. And this brings into another point as well, when they start redefining terms as well.
Yes.
Like, go ahead.
Yes. Well, when they're trying to redefine so much in our modern society that it's actually becoming difficult to feel, on my part anyway, like an educated individual. Now, I'm not flexing on anybody or anything like this, but I do have a master's degree. I almost completed 2 master's degrees before I left one of the colleges behind. I have studied human beings and human behavior for the better part of 2 decades now, almost, probably. How old am I? Shit. Almost 35. So a little less, maybe almost 15 years or so. But it's people can't just change what things are. There are terms like slang terms that we've changed the meaning of over time, but certain things still mean what they've always meant because they are very specifically meant for those things. Displaying hate is not defined as not giving someone the time of day, like not giving them your attention, because that's a histrionic thought. That person hates me because they don't pay attention to me. It's like, no, you're a dumbass.
It's almost like victimizing themselves as well, playing the victim role, which is also damaging. Internal
tendencies for victimhood. And there's also a huge part of it that says, like, that, you know, the song "You're Nobody Until Somebody Loves You." They inverted that song, much like I think it was Hailstorm back in the day, and they made it to where you're nobody until somebody hates you. And so all these people want hate to be, they want to be hated in certain ways so that they can be popular among certain groups.
Yep.
And that's retarded. I'm not supposed to say that, Mama Susan, but let's be real. It has significantly slowed down the success of society, so it's retarded. Literal definitions.
It is what it is. And to build upon that a little bit, it's very easy. Again, it's not casting blame, right? It's just calling something out for. It's an observation, and it's you see it in all aspects of it. You even see it in communities, like, you know, not to name names, but
yes,
you can see it in you know, the for example, the so-called Phantom Menace community. You know, it's like we got to differentiate calling something out and then hating on something, because hate, you know, the longer you delve in that, it does, you sort of breed hate.
Well, and
like
hate sells.
Really acting on it.
Yeah, hate sells these days too, though. And I'm not chiming in on the Phantom Menace comment.
That's cool.
Just simply because I'm indifferent towards most of the people in the community. And that's here's another important aspect of this conversation. There is a difference between blind indifference and practiced indifference. When you have a philosophical indifference towards things, that means that you accept the nature of the universe so that nothing that happens can actually be out of the natural order of the universe. So that's no reason to upset you. And then beyond that, it goes into you have to look at how much it's actually affecting you. I seem incredibly indifferent towards the suffering of people across the world. And that's because it's not directly affecting me. So I can't give all my emotion to people suffering all over the world, because we have enough people suffering here. So that makes me have practiced indifference towards most of the people in the world, because their problems are not within my sphere of control or influence to be able to change. So I shouldn't have to actually care about the rest of those people. Just saying. Murica. Before we move on, there's been a few fun people popped into the chat. Hail, Casey, Charlie, chats. My brain broke for some reason on that. It's all good that you missed the start of the stream. You're here now, and it's wonderful to have you. We'll get back to that one. JT Guns, hail, sir. Lola Meats, hey there. Quite the avatar. Boosh McFadden, he said he couldn't stay long, but that's okay. We welcome you while you're here and miss you while you're gone. But this is another important thing about indifference. It can be a natural result of exposure. As Small Time Republic points out, indifference can also happen if you get exhausted from hate. The clinical term for that is actually compassion fatigue. It's a form of burnout. I know it's a weird thing to call it, but it's the same thing that happens with first responders when they can't do their job anymore because they're too burned out to do it. It's called compassion fatigue. When your emotional reserves are so dead, you just can't care anymore. But anyway, but he does bring up a good point. And indifference can be programmed through exposure. Do you think that that's kind of what's being shot for in society today, as more of an exposure therapy, desensitization?
I think for the longest of time, and I'm going to be careful because I don't want to get too political, but I think the ones in control, the control system, we'll just call it that, for it to keep its control, it needs to keep the population in a state of imbalance and fighting amongst themselves. Now, however, I think they've gotten to a point where not only are they desensitizing people, getting people so fatigued, like mentally and emotionally. You were just touching upon, as someone who, empathizes, sympathizes. I have definitely felt it where it gets to the point at the end of the day where I get so emotionally distraught, where I just don't care anymore, because it's just too taxing. You have to kind of understand what you can and can't affect in a world of almost 8 billion people, if we're to take that statistic
We'll
at face
see.
value.
And that's actually one of the reasons I stopped chasing being a counselor as a profession, is because I actually experienced compassion fatigue while practicing. And I was like, you know what, fuck this. And
But
then I
here's
started
the,
studying like the deeper, rooted natures of it, and I stopped caring about treatment.
But here's the complexity to it, though, and again, it's touching upon what you're saying. There is a lot of people, and I've seen it, and it's a great danger. That's why I think if enough of us were conscious enough, we could change the world, and why it needs to change one way or another. If enough people get to that point where they experience that fatigue, a real danger is they just shut down emotionally, and it can lead to the more darker aspects of humanity, where that can also breed a hatred. It can breed bitterness, and it can breed not fear, but a want to not experience empathy anymore, or sympathy, or even human contact.
Well, as I've seen in the first responders cases that suffer from compassion fatigue, let's say, it's also attributed as being one of the leading causes for substance use in the profession. And if these people who are trained to be semi-insulated against that kind of stuff can fall into that, then anyone can. And, I think that a lot of people use substances to try and reach a state of indifference.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because they can't, like, all addicts, ladies and gentlemen, this is a groundbreaking revelation. I don't know if you know this or not, but all addicts struggle with emotions. Shocker.
Shocking, right?
So,
I mean,
that's also a reason that a lot of drug users can be very hateful, because they don't control their emotions. Their emotions control them.
Like when you abuse anything that you can get addicted to, it can, again, we're getting into that imbalance. It's one life or a conscious being is out of balance. Well, it's unhealthy. It's unnatural. It shouldn't be. There's a reason why human beings experience depression, which
Mm-hmm.
I just have to say, it should be taken more seriously than it is, especially in certain places in the world.
Yes.
Because I feel like, at least to start with, it's a warning sign for the person experiencing that something in their life is either out of balance or is
Yep.
not. It's threatening their ability to function.
Yes.
And
And Lasso of Truth actually brought up a point with that a little earlier. She said if we're constantly empathizing with everybody all the time, we'll be in a permanent state of depression. And that's because a lot of people don't want to admit the fact that emotions are expendable resources, like attention and a lot of other non physical things about humanity. It's a finite resource. You can expend it, you can get rid of it
yeah,
completely and break your ass. You
mhm.
know, it's
Because
it's
really,
part of life.
really quickly now, because you've
Yeah.
touched on some really good points, and let me see if I can get them out there as short and as compact as possible. Like, when it comes to substance abuse, for example, and I gotta be clear about this. This is not me judging at all, because I can relate to it. I've I've been kind of stubborn. For some reason, I can't explain it. I've often wondered how I didn't, but I'm someone who, has purposefully stayed away from alcohol, you know, certain drugs, things like that, purely because, I don't like where it takes you.
Right.
I don't like the imbalance it can lead to, and that's not me judging. That's not me saying I'm better than anyone else. It's just
No,
because
not at
I
all.
was lucky enough early on in life to be shown some, let's just say, some really quote unquote good examples of what it leads to, and I made a conscious choice to not go down that road. Now, that being said, there have been days, let me tell you, where I was like, I just wanted to, like, not care anymore and go, binge on alcohol, take some drugs, just because I didn't want to feel that empathy, that sympathy anymore, that need, to,
Yeah.
how can I explain it? Make a difference in the world, to feel connections with people. Um, or, just I'm going through such a rough time in life that it was just too much, and through that I learned, so some people are so quick to judge. It actually it was a humbling experience for me. When I see I've had a lot of friends that have abused drugs, that have been
Yeah.
addicts,
Same.
really wonderful, kind-hearted people, but they just, everyone has their limits, everyone. And that leads me into the other thing I wanted to say, touch upon, which you spoke about a few minutes ago. Everyone, and I do mean everybody, are capable of, okay, maybe excluding psychopaths,
Mhm.
the dark aspects of humanity and the good aspects of humanity. Everyone has a dark side. Like anyone that says, "Oh no, I don't," I would
Bullshit.
yeah,
The more you
exercise
deny it, the
caution on them.
darker it is.
Yeah, that to me, that's willful ignorance. That is denial, full on denial. And that's not judging. It's just, when you deny that part of you, I've often noticed that it builds and builds and builds.
It does.
And one that, yeah, they can end up being the more darker people out there than those that at least acknowledge their dark side. And
Yep.
this, again, that leads me into maturity, what we talked about earlier. When you acknowledge those aspects of you and, you know other people around you, you develop your maturity. You are
Yep.
given an opportunity to understand what that means, and to better be able to control those aspects of you, because you're aware of them, right? You're conscious of those aspects. And again, it leads into choice.
Yep. Good night,
Later,
JT
JT Gunn.
Gunn.
And through choice, we are able to go into certain things in society, like social interactions, or interactions with those parts of society where you are able to be conscious of what's going on, and then you're conscious of choice. A lot of
Yep.
people, they don't have that at all, and that's when they get, emotionally unstable, mentally unstable. And again, I'm not attacking those people.
No, not at all.
I'm just saying we live in a society right now that is taking away people's consciousness.
Yep.
And
It's making them less aware of the parts of themselves that make them
Mhm.
actually human.
yeah,
And that can be as dehumanizing as you want.
Mhm.
Whoever takes that however you want, you can take that however you want. But you literally destroy the aspects of humanity when you start eliminating certain things. Emotion, rational control,
Mhm.
the ability to mature, like both
Even
in
conscious of it.
mindset and being aware of yourself, self-awareness. They're trying to take that away too, people. Like that'll be a discussion in a future dark philosophy, self-awareness, because I feel there is a dangerous lack thereof. And that also feeds into the hate conversation and the indifference conversation, because they're not aware of themselves enough to recognize the difference between hate and discomfort, or when they need to be indifferent towards a situation, deal with it with logical mind instead of emotional mind.
Yeah.
They're not aware of these things, and these are key aspects of being human.
And that leads me again into my point I made earlier with the control system.
Mm-hmm.
That's its purpose. Once you take that away from humanity, you have the what I kind of termed the perfect slave. It will do anything the control system wants because it will no longer be conscious of what that said being is doing anymore. It will no longer question things. It will be the unhealthy version of indifference. It goes beyond indifference at that point. You're no longer aware of yourself. You're nothing more than a bioorganic machine at that point. No
Yes.
consciousness. They've taken spirituality out of the equation. And that's what I mean by the imbalance. That's the one of the first steps. You make people so emotionally imbalanced, so mentally intellectually, mentally unstable, unbalanced there, and spiritually as well.
Yes.
And not to go too much into those because you could spend entire
Yes.
episodes just
Yes.
talking about that. But yeah, that's
Indeed.
yeah.
But Sean Estep has a question here. He says, which is scarier future? Equilibrium with no emotions or idiocracy with degenerated humanity? Um Honestly, I'd be more afraid of stupid, because when you're dealing with an equilibrium kind of society where emotion's not in it, people are predictable to the nth degree. Okay, that's why control is so easy, because they know what you're going to do. In idiocracy, stupid people do you can't predict stupid. It's going to react. That's all it does. Stupidity reacts. The prefrontal cortex doesn't engage with emotion. That's why stupid people are emotional, and emotional people get stupid. I'm just going to be honest. Low educated people, and look up the studies, people. I'm not going to do your work for you. Don't be low information people. Go look it up. It's a legit fact. People with a lower intelligence, and I'm talking actual intelligence, not like I'm academic smart, but people with lower actual intelligences are more emotional. More emotional means less controllable, which means more volatile, etc., etc. Doesn't work in any type of governmental structure. It doesn't. Idiocracy is special because they enslaved them through the corporate world. They're like, buy, 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 and it has what plants need, you know. But
You bring up
personally, I think stupid. I personally think idiocracy is more scary. But what do you
you
think?
bring up some really good points there. And even though um, I won't use the term scary, but I will use disturbing.
Yeah.
I think what's more disturbing for me, I will actually go with equilibrium, purely for the sake that people are making a choice, a
Yes.
conscious choice to shut themselves down emotionally and
This
take
is
a
true.
substance that is given out by a control system that that will basically make people no longer feel empathy,
Anything.
sympathy, any
Yeah.
they will be like just killing someone, and there'll be no consequence to it. Though you'll feel
Yep.
nothing. And it kind of ties into a little bit like, let me be clear, both of those, it's like what was it Lasso said, they're both like, choose your dystopian future, right? They're both
Yeah.
terrible. I mean,
Equilibrium is
I'd rather have
pointless.
neither.
Both are awful. Yeah.
But
Hail Roger Ryder.
hey
I'm glad to
there,
see you're indifferent.
There you go. There's an indifference answer for you. And just real quickly to finish that point with
Mhm.
equilibrium, you because then you've got the perfect sway. At least with stupidity, you can kind of have an excuse there because with the lack of education, it can come from society. You can kind of say, well, not to, and I do not like it when people play victim, but you can kind of make the statement that you were oppressed in a way.
Yeah.
You were never given the option to develop yourself further because you were
Right.
not given the options to educate yourself, for
Well,
example.
yeah, the Brave New World.
Mhm,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Whereas with equilibrium,
Hmm.
they've sold a product to you, and you've made the conscious choice to take it. And
Well, as
yeah,
someone else pointed out, where is it? Shawnee Step says it's forced through indoctrination. So they're programmed to make these choices, but you are correct. It is still a choice.
yeah. I
The
mean,
problem with that
it's
kind of
yeah.
society is that once you start making those choices, especially allowing them to change your body's chemical makeup,
Mm.
your neurochemical balance, neurotransmitters will be all out of whack and stuff like that. But the problem with that is you don't know when to say no, or you're not programmed to actually recognize that something is wrong. So as Sean said, it's it's a very dangerous choice system, but it's also a choice system that they're not consciously aware of the choices that they're making because of the indoctrination. And that's the society we're going towards today, people.
And just
Just
really
saying.
quickly, can I touch upon something Lasso just said? She
Yes.
said in equilibrium it was forced. That's an interesting point you bring up there, Lasso, because we have to analyze what it means to be forced to do something.
Well, the whole reason behind that is they punish people who don't comply.
You see, the
But
thing is, it's for like the greater good,
I
because one
hate that.
people, yeah, like, yeah, so do I. Like you wouldn't believe, but just my train of thought, real quickly. I struggle with it. When it comes to propaganda and again emotional and mental manipulation, oh, when people feel empathy and sympathy and emotionally unstable, it causes war and conflict and people fighting in the streets, again, controlled demolition, and it was controlled. Then they cue the medication that it it is forced. I will agree with you to a certain extent, but there's still a choice there to be had. You can, as the movie wonderfully portrays, you can choose not to take that substance. It's a difficult choice. I will agree, and it's a dangerous one. But that's no one said it would be easy. These are the choices we face. Even it parallels our own society. We either can take that medication, which ironically, is yeah, I got to be careful not to get this video removed from YouTube. But there's a certain aspect of society where it's pushing, in some aspects of the world, forcing that medication on you, and we have to stand strong. There was another comment there: either we live free or we don't. It's like Stargate. To bring up Stargate a little bit, I would rather die free than live as a slave. It's a
Yes.
difficult choice. I'm not, I completely empathize and sympathize. Again, it's that fear aspect, or that can lead to, hey, we see that too, hating people that don't take it, and they should be
Yes.
punished, or thrown into a camp, or blah blah, or
It's
to a really terrible extent killed,
mhm.
because they're a threat to
And
the rest of the species.
well, and we in modern society focus on incredibly arbitrary things to hate each other over. And that's a problem that I see with modern society is that we don't focus on salient issues to elicit these kinds of emotional responses. Because I'm sorry, whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, gay, lesbian, transgender, doesn't matter. If you're a dick, I'm gonna hate you. And that's coming from a more logical place than I'm going to hate you because of any of the aforementioned racial things or social choices that people make. And that's why I think hate is one of the worst and most damaging tools that people are programmed to elicit in modern society. But before we continue this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, let's start the viewers' votes. The light topics for next week are responsibility, cryptids, and social engineering. Begin the vote. All right, back to the
Can I
conversation.
real quickly touch upon another comment from Lasso? 'Cause it's a really good comment, Lasso, but they were free to. They what if they stopped, they would be oppressed and possibly killed. And that's the thing. That's the difference between like conscious. You got to be conscious of what your choices are and what the results of making that choice will be. Again, you can choose. They were not forced that medication. They took that medication themselves, but they were told if they were to stop with taking that medication, this and that will happen. So they were still free. They still had the ability to make a choice, as we see. But the problem then is the results of that choice, and we slowly see that happening in society as well right now. So it's all about being conscious of choice, and you know that what our freedoms are, that we are free to make that choice, but what the consequences are. And that's why, again, they're complex subject matters with people's indifference, and why people tolerate that behavior coming from the control system. Again, we're getting into things that people maybe shouldn't be tolerant of. Then the world we are heading into, the path we're going down, is going to be a very dangerous one indeed. And the longer we leave it, I've often said, the longer you let this go on, the worse it's going to be at the end of the day.
Yes, it will.
Yes.
And speaking of maturity, here's my lack thereof. That looks like a penis. It's in the shape of a penis. The vote, the poll. Yeah. Right now, cryptids are leading with 75% of the vote, which is not surprising because that's a great conversation. Haha. So, when it comes to indifference and hate, what do you think is actually more damaging to modern society? Which do you think we would possibly benefit from? Do you think if we expressed actual hate, we would get anywhere?
Is this a question to me or the chat?
You and the chat.
Ooh,
Everybody. Do you
I
think
think
hate actually gets us anything?
you, again, good question. Yes, it does. Again, because I've often said, people need to be able to vent. That's why I'm often willing to, like, with certain people, whether they're my friends or people, that just need to vent. I will happily listen to them because
Absolutely.
it's more healthier to vent about that
Mhm.
stuff than keeping it into, like, suppressing it.
Yes.
So I think sometimes people need to vent about hatred as well, and you gotta also analyze what it means to hate as well. There are things like, if we look at our actions in our everyday lives. I often throw around hatred without really thinking about, oh, I hate this food. I hate, certain things that maybe it's not the right word for it. It's almost
There's
like,
certain things that we dislike that we are willing
there
to
you
say
go.
we hate. That doesn't actually elicit the emotion of hate.
Exactly. And I think suppressing hatred is a lot more dangerous than expressing it. But it also
Yes.
depends on the content, because a lot of people, they will go to such extreme lengths to express their hatred, and then it leads to people dying, people suffering. So it's a
Leads
really
to bad
complicated
things.
question, man. But I think indifference, man. I don't know. It's that leads to a society that is dehumanized, and that society I absolutely do not want to exist within. I would rather have an emotional society than one that isn't. That being said, I completely acknowledge the instability that comes along with emotions, but that's why I want to see a more mature society.
Yes, absolutely. I
I hope
wish
that
that
answers your
could
question
happen.
as best as possible.
Yeah, I think so. Now, Shawnee Step, he says, do you feel hate and anger are necessarily different or the same? I think they are actually very different, but people substitute people substitute hate for anger a lot. They think it's hate when it's literally just a case of basic anger. We've seen that people hail El Crudo. Good to see you. It's a great comic book. But that totally derailed my brain with Crudo here. Okay, they are absolutely different, simply for the fact that anger is a natural human emotion. We feel it towards a lot of different things that we don't necessarily hate. We feel angry when we, say, spill our coffee in the morning, or when we're having a clumsy day, or we feel angry at these times, but it doesn't mean that we hate what's going on in our lives, because normally we love our morning coffee. We might hate the action of spilling it, but that's just us expressing and putting an outlet on our anger towards it. Anything can fuel it. Hate, as a directed action of anger, differentiates itself because of the behaviors displayed when being hateful. It's often more damaging than actually just being or getting angry. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and it looks like Cryptids wins with 80% of the vote. Very nice. And now to move on to the next topics. Got to take that off the screen. Ha. All right. Sorry.
I'll just chime in real quick on Sean's question. And it does, like I agree with what you said there, Corey. And for me, yeah, they are two very different. And like I think also she mentioned, one can lead to the other. Usually, anger leading to hate. But I think anger is a good thing. You talked, Corey, about righteous hatred, which I think I don't think there is such a thing as
I don't either.
hatred, but I do think there is such
How
a
it's
thing.
displayed, though.
Yeah, it's of course it's all about what you do with that emotion and how you express it. But I do think there is such a thing as righteous anger, because I think again, certain things you need to get angry about. Sure, there are certain things that maybe some people should get as angry as they do, but I think again that comes again with consciousness and being conscious over that emotion. I think a lot of people need to get a lot more angry at certain things in society than they are. But again, a lot of it is misplaced anger as well. So again, it's complex.
Yes, it is. So here's the next poll. The great topics are astral projection, impulse and emotional and impulse control, and sex. Everyone's favorite topics. I gotta write
That's a
down
very
the
good
fact.
point. Jacob Ironside had a really good comment there. I want a society where people are masters of their emotions and not mastered by their emotions.
Yes, I would love a truly stoic society as well. And for those of you who don't know what stoicism is all about, it's actually about learning and controlling your emotions. The learning part being the most important, by the way. Because if you don't learn about your emotions, then you can't control them. BT dubs.
And again, it's all about just understanding what it truly means to be stoic. And because a lot of people think, again, they misinterpret being stoic as emotionally shutting themselves down.
Yes, and that is not the case, ladies and gentlemen. As you can tell by me, I do practice stoicism, but I'm not an emotional basket case, but I'm still a fun person. Most of the time. But this has been a fantastic discussion, people. The chat has been killing it tonight. It's great. And our guest has been killing it tonight as well. Jeremy did text me. He was going to join us, but he didn't notice the text until like 20, 30 minutes into the stream. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. He's like, I think I'm just going to sit this one out. I'm like, okay, that's fair. We'll see him next week on Dark Philosophy.
Can I just real quickly state
go for it, dude.
that there's been some wonderful opinions there, and always remember, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to be different. And through that, again, being conscious of that, we can, remain in control of our emotions and our mental state, and, truly get progression in society. So it's great. Please, feel free to disagree and feel free to state why you disagree.
Right.
That's what comes along with freedom of speech, and why it's important.
Remember, think about what you're think about what you're gonna say and make sure you have your actual points there.
Yeah,
that's my modifier to what he's saying. Think
Again,
first.
that comes with being conscious of what you're saying, and it's okay. You know, sometimes it's a learning process, and I still struggle with it. Is sometimes you'll realize that maybe you would have said things a little differently after the fact. You know, that's all part of learning and maturing. Actually, that's a better word for it. Is once you mature more, once you get more used to it, once you're more developed consciously, it'll be more, like a snap of the finger. But when you're like me, for example, I'm still struggling with my emotional and mental state. There may be certain things that I'll say that maybe afterwards I will contemplate and think on, and maybe, would I say things differently? Yeah, actually, I should have put it in this context, in this format. So just certain things to be aware of. I think, just putting it out there, and if people can at least think on that, maybe it'll change things for the better, even on a small scale.
Sorry, I was muted. So this is an actual book, I'm pretty sure. It's called Hating My Emotional Anger by Be More Chill. And I love the name of that author. And I should probably see if that is an actual book and then get it too, because I love books like that. For those of you out there who enjoy psychological reading, I would absolutely suggest picking up The Family Crucible. Have it around here somewhere, and I can't remember the author's name, but it is a fantastic look at how families should, irrational absolute there, become a cohesive unit. It brings environmental psychology into it a little bit, in the fact that it's not a closed environment setting. It's great. It's fantastic. And if that's not a real book, El Crudo, you need to make that a real book under that pseudonym. It can be a kid's book and it'll sell like fire. I'll be like, oh yeah. Just saying. I'm gullible sometimes, but mostly because I'm a lazy researcher. I almost couldn't say that with a straight face. Ooh, perfectly tied up on the polls with astral projection, emotional and impulse control, and sex at 33%. That means 3 people voted for each, right? Yeah. I math. Wow. If you guys don't pick one of these, I'm going to throw a wild card next time. Like, you better hurry up.
Have you figured out what you're gonna do for if you get a choice that's on a draw?
I haven't yet.
Or like,
I haven't yet, and I was thinking about having my guest break it.
oh,
Yellow
okay.
River by I.P. Freely. That was a great book too. Yes, I loved that one. Now he's just being a turd. Thank you, Crudo. I like having the chat up here like this. It's great.
Yeah. Now you know me, man. I love interacting with the chat, and it's
Oh yeah. Without the chat, we wouldn't be here.
right.
So I don't think that there's much more we can actually say on the hate and indifference thing without drawing this out another hour.
Right.
And you all know me. I don't do more than an hour on my own shows because it keeps you coming back for more.
Mm-hmm.
I let my secret out. Damn, now they won't come back.
Doubtful.
Maybe I'll just have to actually replace that with some personality and charisma sometime.
Which you have plenty of.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm ending this poll. So, Sean, which one of these 3 would you like to break the tie on?
Could you read them out for me, bro?
Astral projection, emotional and impulse control, and sex.
Ooh, those are. I can see why those are a tie. Well, knowing the fact that you will recycle some of those if they don't get picked, I think I'm gonna have to go with emotional and impulse control.
Nice. Good choice. I like it. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, no sex talk. You'll have to learn how babies are made through the normal way and just look at porn. By the way, porn ruins lives. Don't actually go watch that.
It's an addiction. It's one of those vices where once it gets out of control, once you get addicted to it, just like other substances.
Yeah. So the great topic for next week, ladies and gentlemen, is emotional and impulse control. How did sex not win? Is this the internet? It is, but not your normal internet. So now we're going to move to the dark topics. Yes, it helps if I actually look at which ones I picked, huh? It's really hard not to say these things while I'm typing them, by the way. And yes, scintillating. So, dark topics are rejection, normalizing mental illness, and addiction. This should be an interesting vote. I hope to see 10 votes in there. If not, then I'll take 9 and be happy. As long as it's not a three-way tie again, because that was disappointing. Chat, judging you right now. Judgment. Yep.
Oh, that's a good judgment. That'll make a
that
good
is. I'm
episode.
gonna write that down.
No.
Should I put that in gray? No, I'm gonna put that in the dark topic section.
That has the potential for a dark section for sure. Judgment. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't see how that's gonna be a gray topic, and it's definitely not gonna be a light topic.
No. Absolutely not.
Wow, Charlie. Writing with Charlie says Electrocuted Chinaman by Yufaka Mi Walsaki. Otherwise known as You're Fucking My Wall Socket and You Got Electrocuted. That's very funny, sir. Hilarious. Love it. We are going to go a few minutes past so we can get this last poll at 5 minutes like the other ones. So, did you have fun on the 500 celebration, sir?
I did, yes. Of course, it was quite the turnout on that panel and in the chat, of course. But yeah, like I said, I'm really here's to 1,000. Hopefully, it'll go.
Hell yeah. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not super worried about the pace of my growth. I mean, these people in the chat and on the replays absolutely kill it by being here and by being amazingly engaging. And I have the most engaging chat on YouTube, in my personal opinion. And I know that's saying a lot, but they actually bring salient points. They take the time to actually like listen and respond. They make us laugh. So I do want to bring up something here. So Jacob Ironside says, James 1:19 through 20. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Even from a philosophical standpoint, taking that out of religious context of the fact that it's from the Bible, that is a major philosophical hangup for a lot of people. They think that their emotions are somehow making them more than human, and that it's elevating them to a level of righteousness. It's just like righteous indignation has nothing righteous about it. You're getting offended because of someone else's thought processes, in my opinion. You know, if you're getting offended, like I get angry and I hate pedophiles. That's plain and simple. I will say that outright. But there's reasons to hate them. They ruin lives. I hate things that ruin lives. That's why I hate the government. Because the government hasn't actually done its job in a long time.
You know, and again, it's also how you understand the meaning of righteousness as well. You know, a lot of people like to think when they get righteous, they're somehow more than human. They're somehow better than you. So it's a superior complex thing for some people. I don't view it that way. I just view it as it's in like it's tied to morality for me. Like for me, like righteous, I think it's righteous for people to get angry at pedophiles. I think it's righteous to get angry at a control system that is constantly destroying lives. That's how I approach it. Now, maybe I might have gotten my definition wrong there. You know, I might be a little rusty on the definition of righteous, but it also, you know, a lot of people, they bring religion to it and things like that, and then it gives it a different context. So you're more than welcome to chime in on what I just said there, dude, and correct me.
I agree. Honestly, I do. I think that My brain broke because I'm sorry. I got to bring this up. El Crudo retracted this message. It says LOLOL. I'm sorry. It lives forever now. Crudo. That's what you get. What's up? So currently it's looking like it's going to be normalizing mental illness. And the reason I say that is because it's got less than a minute left and it hasn't changed in a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one at normalizing mental illness. And yeah, I chose that topic for my benefit more than anyone else's. So
I think both of us can relate to that. Those are near and dear to us, as we've had a lot of experience with that subject matter. So
indeed.
I'm looking forward to next week's episode and seeing what people have to say on that one.
Me too. So the white topic for next week is cryptids. The gray topic is emotional and impulse control. And the dark topic is normalizing mental illness. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to say good night. Sean, is there anything you'd like to pitch or say hi to the chat or anything?
I'm going to take a break from pitching anything today, but I would like to say thank you to the chat and thank you to you as well. It's been a great show, and thanks for having me.
This has been a fantastic show, and thank you for coming on. And thank you to everyone watching live. Thank you to everyone watching the replay. Make sure that you share this with your friends so they can understand our philosophical takes on hate and indifference. As always, I love the fact that you are here, and we will see you next time. Until then, have a wonderful day.